An average really fast speedrun time for Book 1, Chapter 1 is 7 minutes and 40 seconds. For Chapter 2, almost 8 minutes. For Chapter 3, 8 minutes and 40 seconds. And for Book 1, Chapter 4, 10 minutes and 40 seconds. Now we get to Book 2, Chapter 1, 13 minutes. And then we get to Book 2, Chapter 2, 29 minutes. And Book 2, Chapter 3, also around the 28 to 29 minute mark. So with an increase of chapter lengths and also a longer time from when we get these updates, are they actually better? Book 1 Chapter 1 was the very first chapter the Mimic added, and also one of the shortest. However, for me, and my first time experience, was one of the scariest, and to this day, still think has the best vibe out of all the Mimic chapters. Chapter 2 is roughly the same with a little bit harder encounters. Chapter 3 they started experimenting a bit with RNG, and Chapter 4 tried different endings to end the chapter. For me, Book 1 had the perfect lengths for a chapter. It was something you could hop right into and finish without a sweat. Then Book 2 arrived. The first chapter, Book 2, Chapter 1, according to speedrunners, was not as massive increase in time from Chapter 4, but for the average player, this chapter took way longer. More RNG was added and some odd monster AI, and was much harder to figure out for a new player. However, Book 2, Chapter 2 was the massive change, even for speedrunners, over double in time to complete. This chapter also included a boss fight, which took a lot of time, and also a cooking part which locked you into a certain amount of time with no way of going any faster. Chapter 3 was also very similar to this, where it locked you into a lot of parts where you couldn't go any faster no matter what you did. But to compare, let's take Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 since they are double the size of a regular chapter. Are they twice as good? The question depends on what you prefer. Those two chapters both have boss fights and a more intense story rather than scary. I think one thing Chapter 3 also did incredibly well that I forgot to mention was the vibe. They nailed the Jyoku Hell vibe and a lot of cutscenes. However, if you prefer almost a more horror movie vibe, I think Book 1 and the shorter chapters were the way to go. For Book 1, the story, which may not have been better, for some it may be, but for some it might not be, it was more immersive because of how scared you were. And I think for Book 2, I think they lost that because it was over-designed. It's kind of like what made Book 1 so scary. It was the glitches, and you didn't know what was going to happen. In my opinion, I enjoyed Book 1 more and the shorter chapters, and plus we got more frequent updates with the shorter chapters too. I don't think the change from shorter chapters will happen in Book 2, and that's only because of the massive climax you're supposed to get with like all the boss fights and all that for Book 2, Chapter 4. I believe that is with Jealousy. But in Book 2, it might happen, and I think we need to see a change in size for Book 3. And I do think Book 2 has the strengths as the longer chapters. The only thing I'm really complaining about is how long it takes for the chapters to come out. Because we're also getting double the size, but it's taken about 3 or 4 times as long as we got a chapter out in Book 1. And also for how long chapters come out is not just because of the size. The game has way more details now, which also do take longer. If in Book 3, and I really hope they do change the size, I really do think we can get more frequent updates. Even if details still take longer with the size, I do think it will really help with the update schedule. So the next chapter, if you guys didn't know, is about Yuma, also known as Rebirth. And with some research I have done about the story, if they can conquer the Book 1 vibe with Yuma, I think it'll be an awesome book. But if I had to choose between the longer chapters and the shorter chapters in the whole, and it didn't have anything to do with the update schedule, I think I would still pick the shorter chapters as I did love the vibe.